The charred remains of what had been Emma Calloway's home crackled and hissed in the summer heat of 1878, sending acrid smoke curling into the Montana sky while she knelt in the ash-covered grass with tears streaming down her soot-stained cheeks. Emma was 23 years old and had spent the last 5 years building a life in the rugged territory near Bozeman, Montana. Her husband had died 3 winters ago from pneumonia, leaving her alone on their modest homestead with nothing but determination and the small cabin they had built together. Now even that was gone, reduced to blackened timber and shattered dreams. She had been in town purchasing supplies when the fire started. A neighbor riding past had spotted the flames, but by the time anyone could respond, there was nothing left to save. Her hands trembled as she picked up a twisted piece of metal that had once been her cooking pot. Everything she owned had been inside that cabin. Her clothes, her late husband's pocket watch, the quilt her mother had sewn before Emma left Ohio to come west. All of it was ash now. "Madam," the voice startled her. Emma looked up through her tears to see a tall man on horseback, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. As he approached, removing his hat respectfully, she could see he was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that fell just past his collar. His eyes were a striking gray-blue, and they held genuine concern as he took in the devastation. "I am sorry to disturb you," he said quietly. His voice had a slight drawl that suggested he had come from somewhere south, though Emma could not place exactly where. "I was riding toward town when I saw the smoke. Is anyone hurt?" Emma shook her head, unable to find words. Her throat felt tight with grief and shock. The man crouched down beside her, his worn leather chaps creaking slightly. He studied the ruins with a practiced eye, then looked back at her face. "Was this your home?" "Yes," Emma managed, her voice breaking on the single word. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "It was all I had left." The stranger was quiet for a long moment, and Emma felt embarrassed by her display of emotion in front of this man she did not know. She tried to wipe her face with the back of her hand, succeeding only in smearing more ash across her skin. "I am Lucas Irving," the man said finally. "I just hired on at the Anderson Ranch about 10 miles east of here." He gestured in the general direction. "Been in Montana territory about 2 weeks now, came up from Texas." Emma nodded mechanically, not particularly caring about his history in that moment, but appreciating that he was trying to give her time to compose herself. Lucas stood and walked closer to the ruins, examining them carefully. Emma watched as he circled the destroyed cabin, occasionally prodding something with the toe of his boot. When he returned to where she still knelt, his expression was thoughtful. "The fire started in the back corner," he observed, "near where I would guess your stove was." "Did you have a fire going this morning?" "No," Emma said. "I banked the coals last night, but they should have been cold by dawn. I left for town just after sunrise." She struggled to her feet, her legs shaky. "Could it have been the chimney?" "My husband always worried about creosote buildup, but I cleaned it just last month." Lucas shook his head slowly. "I do not think this was an accident, madam." The words sent a chill through Emma despite the heat radiating from the smoldering ruins. "What do you mean? See there." Lucas pointed to an area near what had been the back of the cabin. "The burning pattern suggests accelerant, coal oil most likely, and there are horse tracks here, fairly fresh, heading off toward the creek." He looked at her seriously. "Do you have any enemies?" "Anyone who might want to drive you off this land." Emma's mind reeled. She thought of the past few months and the increasing pressure she had felt. "There is a man," she said slowly. "Garrett Moss. He owns the property to the north. He has been trying to buy my land for the past year." said a woman alone has no business trying to run a homestead. You turn him down. Every time. This land has water access and good grazing. My husband chose it carefully. Emma looked at the ruins with new eyes, anger beginning to kindle beneath her grief. You truly think someone did this deliberately? I have seen range wars in Texas, Lucas said grimly. This has the look of someone trying to send a message. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "What will you do now?" The question hung in the air. Emma had been so consumed by grief that she had not thought beyond the immediate shock. She had a little money in the bank in town, but not enough to rebuild and survive the winter. She had no family in Montana territory, and the journey back to Ohio would take what little funds she had. Even if she made it back east, what waited for her there? Her parents had died when she was 19, and her only brother had moved to California years ago. I do not know, she admitted, her voice small. Lucas studied her for a long moment. Then he settled his hat back on his head and said something that would change the course of Emma's life. "I'll build you another." Emma stared at him. "What? A cabin? I will build you another one." Lucas gestured to the surrounding land. "You have good timber nearby, and if what you say is true, you have legal right to this property. A woman should not lose her home because some bully wants to expand his holdings." "I cannot ask you to do that," Emma protested. "You do not even know me, and I have no way to pay you." "You did not ask, I offered." Lucas walked over to his horse and pulled a canteen from his saddle, bringing it back to Emma. "Here, drink something. You are covered in soot and look like you might collapse." Emma took the canteen with shaking hands and drank. The water was warm but tasted wonderful against her parched throat. "Why would you help me?" she asked when she finished. Lucas was quiet for a moment, looking out over the land. "My mother was widowed when I was 15, he said finally. "My father was killed when a bull gored him. We had a small ranch in Texas, and the moment my father was gone, the vultures started circling. Other ranchers, men who had called my father friend, suddenly had reasons why my mother should sell to them for pennies on the dollar. Told her she could not possibly manage alone, that it was not proper for a woman to run a ranch." He turned back to Emma, and she could see old anger simmering in his eyes. "My mother kept that ranch going through sheer stubbornness and hard work. She held on until I was old enough to take over. She taught me that a person's worth is not determined by whether they are male or female, but by their character and determination." He paused. "I learned carpentry from my uncle during slow seasons. I know how to build a solid cabin. And I would rather spend my time helping someone who needs it than let another bully win." Emma felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the ones she had shed before. "I do not understand why a stranger would show me such kindness." "Maybe that is exactly why I should," Lucas replied simply. "We are all strangers until we are not, and out here, people need to help one another or none of us will survive." Emma looked at the ruins of her home, then at this tall Texan who had appeared as if summoned by her desperation. She should probably be more cautious. After all, she knew nothing about Lucas Irving except what he had told her. But something in his steady gaze and the honest way he spoke made her want to trust him. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you, I accept your help." Lucas nodded once as if the matter was settled. "First things first, do you have somewhere to stay while we rebuild?" "There is a boarding house in town," Emma said. "Mrs. Patterson runs it. I have enough money to stay there for a while, though not indefinitely." "Good. You should head there now, get cleaned up and rest. I will talk to my boss at the Anderson Ranch, explain the situation. Then tomorrow I will come back and start surveying what we will need." He glanced at the sky, which was beginning to take on the golden hue of late afternoon. "It will be dark in a few hours. You should not be out here alone, especially if I am right about this being deliberate." A shiver ran through Emma at the thought. If Garrett Moss had truly burned her cabin, what would stop him from trying to hurt her directly? As if reading her thoughts, Lucas added, "I will ride with you to town. Make sure you get there safely." They buried what could be buried of Emma's possessions, which was very little. Lucas helped her search through the cooler parts of the ruins, but they found nothing salvageable. Even the metal items had warped from the intense heat. When darkness began to fall, Lucas helped Emma onto his horse, and they rode toward Bozeman together, Emma sitting behind him on the large roan gelding. The ride took about 45 minutes, and Emma was acutely aware of being so close to this man she had just met. He smelled of leather and horse and wood smoke, scents that reminded her of her late husband. But Lucas Irving was not her husband, and she felt a confusing mix of gratitude and something else she could not quite name as she held onto his waist to keep from sliding off the horse. Bozeman was a growing town in 1878, with a main street that boasted several businesses, a church, a schoolhouse, and the boarding house where Emma would stay. Lucas helped her dismount in front of Mrs. Patterson's establishment, a neat two-story building with a sign reading "Clean Rooms, Fair Rates." "I will be back tomorrow morning," Lucas said. "Around 9 if that suits you." "That will be fine," Emma replied. "And Mr. Irving, thank you again. I do not think I have fully processed what happened today, but your kindness means more than I can express." Lucas touched the brim of his hat. "You will get through this, Mrs. Calloway. I have a sense about people, and I can tell you are stronger than you might feel right now." With that, he rode off into the gathering darkness, leaving Emma standing in the dusty street feeling as if her entire world had shifted on its axis in the space of a single day. Mrs. Patterson was a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took one look at Emma's ash-covered appearance and ushered her inside without questions. "You poor dear, you look like you have been through something terrible. Let me get you some water for washing and something hot to eat." Emma nearly broke down again at the simple kindness. Mrs. Patterson showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor and brought up a pitcher of warm water and a basin, along with a towel and a bar of soap. "I will have some supper ready in 20 minutes, she said. "Take your time getting cleaned up, and then come down when you are ready." Alone in the room, Emma stripped off her ruined dress and washed the soot and ash from her skin and hair as best she could with the basin of water. She had no other clothes except what she was wearing, and even those were barely salvageable. She would need to use some of her limited funds to purchase at least one other dress and some basic necessities. When she was as clean as she could get, she put her sooty dress back on and went downstairs. Mrs. Patterson had set out a plate of beef stew and fresh bread, along with coffee and a slice of apple pie. Emma ate mechanically at first, then with growing appetite as she realized she had not eaten since breakfast. Over the meal, Emma explained what had happened. Mrs. Patterson listened with increasing anger. "I would not put it past Garrett Moss to do something like that," she said when Emma finished. "That man has been a thorn in the side of decent folk since he came to this territory 5 years ago. He owns a big spread, but he always wants more. And he has a mean streak, especially toward women." "Do you think I should go to the sheriff?" Emma asked. Mrs. Patterson considered. "You could, but without proof I doubt Sheriff Coleman will do much. Moss has money and influence, and Coleman is not exactly the bravest man who ever wore a badge." She patted Emma's hand. "But this Lucas Irving who helped you, he sounds like good people. If he is willing to help you rebuild, I would take that as a blessing and not look too closely at the gift." Emma nodded, though she still felt uncomfortable accepting such charity from a stranger. She was raised to be independent and self-sufficient, and relying on someone else's generosity went against her nature. But what choice did she have? That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in the boarding house, Emma could not sleep. Her mind kept replaying the day's events. She thought about her cabin burning, about Lucas Irving appearing as if fate had sent him, about his offer to rebuild. She thought about Garrett Moss and whether he truly was responsible. And she thought about the future, which had seemed so uncertain when she knelt in the ashes, but now held at least a glimmer of hope. Lucas arrived the next morning precisely at 9, riding the same roan gelding. Emma was waiting on the porch, having purchased a simple calico dress and some basic necessities from the general store earlier that morning. The proprietor, a sympathetic man named Mr. Henderson, had extended her credit when he heard about the fire. "Morning, Mrs. Calloway," Lucas said, dismounting. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, thank you," Emma replied, "though still somewhat in shock, I think." "That is understandable." Lucas gestured to his horse. "I spoke with my boss, Frank Anderson. He has given me permission to take some time to help you, as long as I get my regular work done as well. He is a fair man, and he was angry to hear what happened to you." "That is very generous of him," Emma said. "Frank is good people, half the reason I took the job." Lucas helped Emma onto the horse, and they rode out to her property together. In the bright morning sunlight, the ruins looked even more devastating than they had the previous evening. But Lucas surveyed everything with a practical eye, making notes on a piece of paper he had brought. "The stone foundation is still good," he observed. "That will save us time and work, and your well was not damaged, which means we have water on site." He walked the perimeter of the property with Emma following. "You have good timber here, like I thought, pine and spruce. We will need to fell trees and let them cure a bit, but we can start with what is already seasoned." Emma watched him work, impressed by his knowledge and efficiency. "How long do you think it will take?" she asked. Lucas considered. "With just me working, probably 6 to 8 weeks for a basic cabin. If we can get some help, maybe 4 weeks. The question is whether we can get it done before the heavy snows come. It is early August now. We should have until late October or early November if the weather holds." 4 weeks, Emma repeated. She tried to calculate how long her money would last at the boarding house. Even with Mr. Henderson's credit at the general store, she would struggle to make ends meet. "You have any skills that might help you earn money in town?" Lucas asked, as if reading her thoughts again. "Sewing, cooking, anything like that. I can sew reasonably well," Emma said, "and I am a decent cook. My mother taught me to make bread and preserves. Talk to Mrs. Patterson. Maybe she could use help at the boarding house in exchange for reduced rent. And Mrs. Henderson at the general store sometimes needs help with mending and such." It was a good suggestion, and Emma felt a spark of hope. She was not one to sit idle while others worked on her behalf. "I will ask them this afternoon." They spent the rest of the morning planning the rebuild. Lucas sketched out a rough design for a cabin that would be slightly larger than Emma's previous home, with a better chimney design and stronger walls. "If we are going to do this, we might as well do it right," he said. "Make sure it will last." Around noon, Lucas prepared to leave. "I need to get back to the Anderson ranch for afternoon work, but I will come back tomorrow and start marking trees for felling. Do you want to come out here with me, or would you rather stay in town?" "I will come," Emma said firmly. "This is my property and my cabin. I should be part of the work." Lucas smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his somewhat serious face, making him look younger. "I was hoping you would say that. I will need help, and it will go faster with 2 people." Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Lucas would arrive each morning and they would ride out to the property together. He taught Emma how to identify which trees were best for lumber, how to measure and mark them. When he began felling trees with his axe, Emma helped clear brush and branches. It was hard, physical work, and Emma's muscles ached in places she had forgotten existed. But there was something satisfying about seeing the progress, watching the stack of timber grow day by day. During their work, they talked. Emma learned that Lucas was 28, the oldest of 3 children. His younger brother was running the family ranch in Texas now, having married a local girl. His sister had died of scarlet fever when she was 12, a loss that still pained him. Lucas had decided to head north after his mother remarried, wanting to give the newlyweds space and also craving new horizons. "I love Texas," he explained one afternoon as they took a break in the shade of a tall pine. "But I wanted to see what else was out here." Montana territory is beautiful in a different way. Rougher, maybe, but with its own kind of majesty. Emma shared her own story in return. She had met her husband, Thomas Calloway, in Ohio when she was 18. He had been a dreamer, always talking about heading west to claim land under the Homestead Act. They married when she was 19 and headed to Montana territory shortly after. Those first years had been hard but happy. They had worked side by side to build the cabin, to clear land, to establish their claim. "Thomas was a good man," Emma said softly. "Not perfect, but good. He made me laugh, and he never tried to make me feel less than him because I was a woman. When he died, I thought about going back east. But I could not bear to leave what we had built together." "He would be proud that you stayed," Lucas said, "and he would be proud of how you are fighting to keep it now." True to her word, Emma had approached Mrs. Patterson about helping at the boarding house. The older woman had been happy to have the assistance, offering Emma free room and board in exchange for help with cooking and cleaning. Emma had also visited Mrs. Henderson, who had several items needing mending. Between the two arrangements, Emma felt less helpless about her situation. 2 weeks into the rebuilding process, trouble arrived in the form of Garrett moss. Emma and Lucas were at the property, debarking logs that would form the walls of the new cabin, when 3 riders approached. Emma recognized Moss immediately. He was a heavy-set man in his 40s with a thick beard and cold eyes. The 2 men with him looked like hired guns, hard-faced and well-armed. "Well, well," Moss said, reining his horse to a stop near where they worked. "I heard you had some bad luck, Mrs. Calloway. Shame about your cabin." Emma stood, wiping sawdust from her hands. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "Hello, Mr. Moss. Yes, it was quite a tragedy." Moss's gaze shifted to Lucas, assessing him. "Do not believe I have met your friend here." "Lucas Irving," Lucas said, not offering his hand. He had set down his tool and stood in a relaxed but alert posture that suggested he could move quickly if needed. "I am helping Mrs. Calloway rebuild." "That's so." Moss's expression hardened. "Seems like a lot of trouble to go to for a piece of property that is not worth much." "The property is worth plenty to me," Emma said firmly. "It is my home." "About that," Moss said, his tone becoming businesslike, "I have been thinking, Mrs. Calloway. A woman alone out here, no protection, buildings that might catch fire at any time. It is dangerous. I am prepared to offer you a fair price for your land, more than fair actually, $500. Emma knew the land was worth at least twice that, probably more. "I have told you before, Mr. Moss, my land is not for sale." Moss's jaw tightened. "Now, do not be foolish, woman. $500 is good money. You could go back east, live comfortable." "I said no," Emma repeated, her anger rising, "and I think you should leave." One of the hired guns shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun belt. Lucas moved slightly, positioning himself between Emma and the riders. "You heard the lady," he said quietly. Time for you to go." Moss stared at Lucas for a long moment, something calculating in his expression. "You are making a mistake," he said finally, addressing Emma. "This territory is hard on people who do not know when to take good advice." "Is that a threat?" Lucas asked, his voice still quiet but with an edge now. "Just a statement of fact," Moss replied. He pulled his horse around. "Think about my offer, Mrs. Calloway. It might not be available forever." As the three riders departed, Emma realized she was shaking. Lucas touched her elbow gently. "Are you all right?" "He did it," Emma said. "He burned my cabin, I am sure of it now." "Probably," Lucas agreed, "but being sure and being able to prove it are two different things." He looked after the departing riders. "We need to be careful. Men like that do not like being told no, especially by a woman." "What should I do?" Emma asked. Lucas considered. "We keep building. We finish your cabin and make sure it is solid, and we watch our backs." He paused, then added, "I will start staying out here at night once we have the walls up. Make sure nobody tries anything. You would do that. I have a bedroll and a good slicker. I have slept in worse places." Lucas picked up his tool again. "Come on." The best response to bullies is to not let them stop you. The encounter with Moss cast a shadow over the following days, but it also strengthened Emma's resolve. She worked harder than ever, determined not to let intimidation win. Lucas matched her determination, and Emma found herself increasingly impressed by his skill and work ethic. He rose before dawn and often worked until dark. On days when he had to put in full time at the Anderson ranch, he would still come by afterward to put in a few hours on Emma's cabin. They were not alone in their efforts for long. Word had spread in Bozeman about Emma's situation and Lucas's efforts to help. Other people began showing up on weekends to assist. Frank Anderson himself came one Saturday with two of his ranch hands, bringing additional tools and expertise. Mrs. Patterson's son, a young man named Henry who worked as a blacksmith, spent a Sunday helping to construct the chimney properly. Even Sheriff Coleman rode out one afternoon, though he did little actual work and mostly watched. "I heard Moss came by and gave you trouble," the sheriff said to Emma. "He made his usual offer to buy my land," Emma replied carefully, and implied that refusing was dangerous. "Now, I am sure he did not mean anything by that," Coleman said, though his tone suggested he knew otherwise. "Moss can be rough around the edges, but he is an important man in this area." "Important enough to get away with arson?" Lucas asked pointedly. Coleman bristled. "That is a serious accusation, Mr. Irving. Do you have any proof?" "Just what my eyes and experience tell me," Lucas replied. "But you are right, Sheriff. No proof that would hold up." After Coleman left, Lucas shook his head. "That man is useless. He is scared of Moss," Emma said. "Everyone knows it." "Then we protect ourselves," Lucas said simply. By the end of the third week, the cabin was really taking shape. The walls were up, constructed of solid pine logs fitted together with careful notching. The roof frame was in place. Lucas had designed it with a steeper pitch than Emma's previous cabin, to better shed snow during the harsh Montana winters. The chimney, built from local stone, rose sturdy and straight. Working so closely with Lucas day after day, Emma found herself noticing things about him that had nothing to do with carpentry. The way he pushed his hair back when he was concentrating. The surprising gentleness of his hands when he helped her down from the horse each morning. His patience in teaching her tasks she had never done before. His quiet sense of humor that emerged once he was comfortable with someone. She caught herself watching him sometimes and felt a confusing mixture of guilt and something warmer. She had loved Thomas deeply, and it had only been 3 years since his death. Was it wrong to feel attracted to another man? Was it a betrayal of Thomas's memory? One evening, as they finished work for the day, Lucas turned to her. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. "You have been quiet today." Emma hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I was thinking about Thomas, about what he would think of all this." Lucas was quiet for a moment, wiping sawdust from his hands. "From what you have told me about him, I think he would want you to be happy and safe. I think he would be glad someone is helping you." "Do you really believe that?" "I do." Lucas looked at her directly. "Emma, grief is a strange thing. It does not follow rules or timelines. You lost someone you loved, and that pain does not just disappear. But feeling that pain does not mean you have to stop living. It does not mean you cannot find new reasons to smile." It was the first time he had called her by her first name, and something about the intimacy of it made Emma's heart beat faster. "Lucas, I want to thank you for everything you have done. I do not think I have expressed properly how much it means to me." "You do not need to thank me," Lucas said. "Honestly, Emma, these past few weeks have been good for me too. I came to Montana looking for purpose, for something more than just riding fence and breaking horses. Helping you, building something tangible, it has given me that." They stood there in the fading light, and Emma felt something shift between them. It was subtle but unmistakable. The working relationship that had formed over the past weeks was becoming something more, something deeper. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses. Both Emma and Lucas tensed, but it was only Frank Anderson riding up with a wagon. "Evening, folks," he called out. "I brought some supplies I thought you might need. Nails, some tar paper for the roof, and my wife sent along supper for you both." Emma and Lucas helped unload the wagon while Frank admired their progress. "You two have done fine work," he said approvingly. "That is a solid cabin. Should last you many years, Mrs. Calloway." They ate the meal Frank's wife had sent, sitting on logs near the construction site. Frank was a talkative man in his 50s, full of stories about Montana territory and the changes he had seen over the years. Emma found herself relaxing, enjoying the easy camaraderie. "I heard Moss paid you a visit," Frank said eventually, his tone becoming serious. "Lucas told me about it." "He did," Emma confirmed. "He was not pleased that I refused his offer." "I imagine not. Garrett Moss is a man used to getting his way." Frank pulled out a pipe and lit it, the tobacco smoke drifting in the evening air. "I have known him for 5 years now, and I can tell you that he is trouble. But he is also cautious. He will push, but only so far. Now that you have people helping you, witnesses around, I think he will back off." "I hope you are right," Emma said, after Frank left. Lucas insisted on riding Emma back to town even though it was getting late. She did not argue. The confrontation with Moss had left her nervous about being alone after dark. During the ride, Emma leaned against Lucas's back, feeling the solid warmth of him. She felt safe with him in a way she had not felt with anyone since Thomas died. It was a revelation, and slightly terrifying. The 4th week brought cooler weather and the first hint that autumn was approaching. The nights grew crisp, and the aspens on the hillsides began to show touches of gold. Lucas worked with increasing urgency, determined to get the cabin weather-tight before the first snow. Emma continued helping at the boarding house and taking in mending, but she spent every possible moment at the property. The cabin was nearly complete now. The roof was on, sealed against rain and snow. The door and window frames were installed. Lucas had even built a small porch, saying that every home needed a place to sit and watch the sunset. On a Friday afternoon, as they worked on building a rough table and chairs for the interior, Lucas spoke suddenly. "Emma, I need to tell you something." His serious tone made Emma look up from the chair leg she was sanding. "What is it?" Lucas set down his tools. "When I first offered to help you, it was because of my mother, because of what she went through, and because it was the right thing to do." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. But somewhere along the way, my reasons changed. Emma's heart began to pound. Changed how? I have come to care for you, Lucas said quietly. More than I intended to, more than I probably should. These past weeks, working with you, talking with you, I have felt something I did not expect to feel. He looked at her directly, his gray-blue eyes intense. I know this is not the right time. I know you are still grieving your husband, and I am supposed to be helping you rebuild your home, not complicating things. But I cannot in good conscience continue without being honest about my feelings. Emma felt a tumult of emotions. Fear, hope, guilt, and beneath it all, a warmth that she could not deny. Lucas, I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything, Lucas replied. I am not asking for anything from you, I just needed you to know. And I want you to know that regardless of your feelings, I will finish your cabin. That was a promise, and I keep my promises. Emma stood, her legs shaky. She walked to the open doorway and looked out at the land she had fought so hard to keep. The land Thomas had chosen, where they had built their dreams together. What would Thomas want for her? She turned back to Lucas, who waited with patient apprehension. My late husband told me something once, shortly before he died. He was feverish and knew the pneumonia was winning. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I would not let grief consume me. He said I should live fully, should find happiness again. Emma's voice caught. At the time, I thought he was delirious, but maybe he understood something I did not. Emma, Lucas said softly. I care for you too, Emma admitted, the words tumbling out. I have been trying not to, telling myself it was too soon, that it was wrong. But the truth is, you have made me feel alive again in a way I thought I never would. You have given me hope, and not just about the cabin. Lucas crossed the space between them in 2 strides. He took her hands in his touch gentle. I do not want to replace Thomas. I cannot, and I would not try. But if you will let me, I would like to build a future with you. A real future, not just a cabin. Emma looked up at him, at this man who had appeared in her darkest moment and brought light back into her world. I would like that, she whispered. Lucas cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and sweet. Emma felt tears on her cheeks, but they were good tears. Healing tears. When they parted, she was smiling. We should probably finish this table, Lucas said, his voice husky, before we get too distracted. Emma laughed, a genuine laugh that felt wonderful, practical as always. One of us has to be, Lucas said, grinning. They finished the table as the sun set, working side by side with a new understanding between them. The future was still uncertain in many ways, but it no longer felt quite so daunting. That weekend, Frank Anderson threw a barn raising, or rather a cabin finishing party. It seemed half of Bozeman showed up with food and supplies. The men helped Lucas complete the interior finishing work, building a proper bed frame, shelves, and a better fireplace hearth. The women brought curtains, quilts, dishes, and other household items to replace what Emma had lost in the fire. Mrs. Patterson presented Emma with a beautiful patchwork quilt. Every woman needs proper bedding, she said firmly, and this will keep you warm come winter. Mr. Henderson from the general store brought a new cast iron pot and skillet. Consider it a housewarming gift, he said. You have paid us back with your mending work twice over. By Sunday evening, the cabin was not just complete but furnished and livable. Emma walked through it in wonder, touching the smooth wood of the table, the sturdy shelves, the thick walls that would keep out the Montana cold. It was smaller than some homes but perfect for her needs, and it was built with care and love, which made it more precious than any mansion. What do you think? Lucas asked, coming up beside her. It is perfect, Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. Lucas, I do not have words for what you have done for me. What all of you have done, she added, looking at the friends gathered outside sharing food and conversation. "You inspired it," Lucas said. "Your courage, your determination not to let Moss or anyone else drive you away. People admire that, Emma. It makes them want to help." That night, Emma slept in her new cabin for the first time. Lucas had insisted on bedding down outside to maintain propriety, despite Emma's protest that everyone in town would know he had been working on the property day and night. But Emma appreciated his consideration for her reputation. Lying in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the new structure settling, Emma felt a peace she had not experienced in years. She had lost her old home, but gained something more. She had gained friends, community, and the promise of love. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and happiness. Emma moved her few possessions from the boarding house to the cabin. Lucas continued working at the Anderson Ranch, but spent his evenings at Emma's property, helping her establish routines and prepare for winter. He showed her how to stack firewood properly, how to bank the fire in the improved chimney, how to weatherproof the windows and door. But mostly they talked and grew closer. They shared meals together, sitting at the table Lucas had built. They walked the property in the long autumn evenings, making plans for spring planting. They sat on the porch and watched the stars come out, comfortable in each other's presence. One evening in early October, as the first snow flurries drifted down from the darkening sky, Lucas brought up the subject they had been dancing around. "Emma, I think we need to talk about the future." Emma, who had been watching the snow with pleasure, turned to him. "What about it?" "About us," Lucas clarified. "About what we are to each other and what we want to be." Emma's heart fluttered. "What do you want us to be?" Lucas reached out and took her hand. "I want to marry you, Emma. I want to make this official. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are beside me and go to sleep every night holding you. I want to build a real life here with you, raise children if we are blessed with them, grow old together." "Lucas," Emma breathed. "I know some people might say it is too soon," Lucas continued. "But I am 30 years old and I have seen enough of life to know when something is right. You are right, Emma. We are right together. I felt it the first day I met you, when you were covered in ash and tears but still had that core of strength, and everything since then has only confirmed it." Emma felt tears welling up, but she was smiling. "I feel it too. I love you, Lucas Irving. I did not think I could love again after Thomas, but you have shown me that the heart has more capacity than I imagined." "So, is that a yes?" Lucas asked, hope and nervousness mingling in his expression. "Yes," Emma said. "Yes, I will marry you." Lucas pulled her into his arms and kissed her as snow fell gently around them. It felt like a benediction, like the world itself was celebrating their commitment. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Bozeman, with half the town in attendance. Emma wore a dress that Mrs. Patterson and several other women had sewn for her, a beautiful blue calico that brought out her eyes. Lucas wore his best clothes and Frank Anderson stood as his best man. Mrs. Patterson served as Emma's matron of honor. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause and cheers. At the reception that followed at the boarding house, there was food and music and dancing. Emma felt like she was floating, held safe by Lucas's strong arms and surrounded by people who had become her family. Frank Anderson made a toast. "To Emma and Lucas," he said, raising his glass. "Two people who found each other in difficult circumstances and proved that love and determination can overcome any obstacle. May your marriage be as solid as the cabin you built together." "To Emma and Lucas," the crowd echoed. Late that night, Emma and Lucas rode out to their cabin under a sky full of stars. It was their home now, their shared home. Lucas carried Emma over the threshold, both of them laughing. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, warming the space. Lucas had arranged for someone to come earlier and prepare the cabin for their arrival. Candles flickered on the shelves, and the quilt on the bed was turned down invitingly. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irving," Lucas said softly. "It feels like a dream," Emma admitted. "6 months ago, I thought my life was over. I was alone and barely surviving, and now you have me," Lucas finished, "and I have you, and we have a future together." They made love that night with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Afterward, Emma lay in Lucas's arms, feeling complete in a way she had not felt in years. She traced her fingers over his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Lucas, can I tell you something?" she asked quietly. "Anything," he replied, his hand stroking her hair. "I used to feel guilty about loving you. I thought it meant I had not loved Thomas enough, or that I was betraying his memory." Emma paused, gathering her thoughts. "But I realize now that is not true. Loving you does not diminish what I felt for Thomas. The heart does not have a finite capacity. It grows to accommodate what we need." "I am glad you feel that way," Lucas said, "because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret giving me your heart." "I could never regret it," Emma assured him. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, warm and safe and loved. The winter that followed was harsh, as Montana winters always were. Snow piled high around the cabin, and the temperature dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows. But Emma and Lucas were prepared. They had ample firewood, food stores, and most importantly, each other. Lucas continued working at the Anderson ranch when weather permitted, but there were weeks when the snow was too deep for travel. During those times, he and Emma were essentially snowbound together. Far from being difficult, Emma found those weeks some of the happiest of her life. They talked for hours, played cards, read aloud from the few books they owned. Lucas taught Emma how to repair leather tack, and Emma taught Lucas some of the more complicated recipes her mother had passed down. They also made love frequently, with the abandon of newlyweds and the privacy afforded by isolation. Emma discovered depths of passion she had not known existed. Lucas was an attentive lover, always concerned for her pleasure as much as his own. In January, Emma realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she tried not to get her hopes up, but as February passed with the same absence, she knew. She was pregnant. She told Lucas on a cold evening as they sat by the fire. He had been carving a wooden spoon, and his hand stilled when she spoke the words. "A baby," he repeated, as if unable to believe it. "Yes," Emma said, happiness and nervousness mingling. "Are you pleased?" Lucas set down his carving and pulled Emma into his lap. "Pleased." "Emma, I am over the moon. We are going to be parents." He pressed his hand gently against her still flat stomach. "A child, our child." "I hope I will be a good mother," Emma said softly. "I never had the chance before." "You will be wonderful," Lucas assured her. "Just as you are wonderful at everything you put your mind to." As winter gradually released its grip and spring arrived, Emma's pregnancy became obvious. She bloomed with it, her skin glowing and her energy high despite the nausea that plagued her mornings. Lucas fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and do less heavy work. Emma tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love. They began preparing for the baby's arrival. Lucas built a cradle from pine, carving it with intricate designs of mountains and horses. Emma sewed tiny clothes from fabric Mrs. Patterson donated, her stitches neat and even. They transformed a corner of the cabin into a nursery area, with the cradle positioned where they could see it from the bed. In early April, Frank Anderson offered Lucas a partnership in the ranch. "You are the best worker I have had in 20 years, Frank said. "And I am getting older. I need someone I can trust to help run things, someone who knows cattle and horses and is not afraid of hard work. What do you say?" Lucas was overwhelmed by the offer. He discussed it with Emma that evening. "It would mean better pay and more stability," he said. "We would have a real stake in something, not just wages. But it would also mean more responsibility and longer hours, at least initially." "I think you should accept," Emma said without hesitation. "Frank is offering you an opportunity to build something lasting, and we could use the financial security, especially with the baby coming." So Lucas became a partner in the Anderson ranch, with a percentage of the profits and a say in decision-making. It was a significant step up from being a hired hand, and Lucas threw himself into the work with renewed vigor. In June, Garrett Moss made one final attempt to cause trouble. He filed a claim with the territorial government disputing Emma's property boundaries, alleging that part of her land actually belonged to him. It was a transparent ploy to create legal difficulties and drain Emma's resources through litigation. But Moss had underestimated the community's support for Emma and Lucas. When word of the false claim spread, a dozen neighbors came forward with documentation proving Emma's boundaries were legally established and had been for years. Mr. Henderson, who served as a notary, provided certified copies of the original land documents. Even Sheriff Coleman, perhaps shamed by his earlier inaction, submitted a statement affirming Emma's legal ownership. The Territorial Land Office dismissed Moss's claim within a week. Shortly after, Moss sold his property and moved to Wyoming Territory. The gossip around Bozeman was that he had gambling debts and other legal troubles catching up with him. Emma did not care about the reasons. She was simply grateful he was gone. On a warm August evening, exactly 1 year after the fire that had destroyed her first cabin, Emma went into labor. Lucas, who had been calm through cattle stampedes and horse accidents, nearly panicked. He had to be forcibly reminded by Mrs. Patterson, who came to assist with the birth, that women had been having babies since the beginning of time and Emma would be fine. The labor was long and difficult. Emma labored through the night and into the next day. Lucas held her hand, wiped her forehead, and murmured encouragement even when Emma cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place. Mrs. Patterson handled the medical aspects with calm competence born of experience. Finally, as the sun set on that August day, Emma gave one final push and their son entered the world. He was red-faced and squalling, with a surprising amount of dark hair. Lucas cut the cord with shaking hands while Mrs. Patterson cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket. "You have a healthy boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, placing the baby in Emma's arms. Emma looked down at her son, at the tiny perfect face and miniature hands, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "He is beautiful," she whispered. Lucas leaned over them both, his eyes suspiciously bright. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Emma." They named him Thomas Lucas Irving, honoring both Emma's first husband and his father. Little Thomas, as they called him, thrived from the start. He was a healthy, happy baby with a good appetite and a surprisingly calm temperament. Being parents transformed Emma and Lucas in unexpected ways. Emma discovered reserves of patience she did not know she possessed, able to function on minimal sleep, and still find joy in Thomas's every smile and milestone. Lucas became even more protective and driven, working harder than ever to provide for his family while still making time to hold his son and help Emma with the endless tasks that come with a newborn. Frank Anderson was delighted to have a baby around and frequently came by with gifts. His own children were grown, and he missed having young ones nearby. He carved wooden toys for Thomas and insisted on being called Uncle Frank. Mrs. Patterson knitted enough blankets and tiny sweaters to outfit 3 babies. The women of Bozeman formed a sort of unofficial support network, stopping by regularly with food, advice, and offers to watch the baby so Emma could rest or get chores done. The years that followed were full and happy. Lucas's partnership in the Anderson Ranch proved successful, and their financial situation improved steadily. They were able to add on to the cabin, creating more room as their family grew. When Thomas was 2, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Grace Marie. 2 years after that, another son arrived, whom they named James Franklin after Lucas's father and Frank Anderson. Emma's property, which she had fought so hard to keep, became a thriving small ranch. Lucas helped her build up a herd of cattle and establish good grazing patterns. They planted an extensive garden and an apple orchard. Emma's preserves became famous in Bozeman, and she sold them at the general store for extra income. The cabin Lucas had built stood solid and strong through harsh winters and hot summers. Each year they added small improvements: a larger porch, a separate bedroom for the children, a proper barn and stable. But the core of the structure, the walls Lucas had notched and raised that difficult autumn of 1878, remained unchanged and steadfast. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved horses and could ride almost before he could walk. Grace was quieter but determined, with Emma's stubborn streak and Lucas's practical nature. James was a happy, rambunctious child who kept them all on their toes. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Lucas and Emma took a rare evening alone while Mrs. Patterson watched the children. They rode out to a high meadow on their property, a place with a view of the mountains that took Emma's breath away no matter how many times she saw it. They dismounted and sat on a fallen log, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Lucas put his arm around Emma, and she leaned against him with the comfortable ease of long familiarity. "You ever think about that day?" Lucas asked. "When I first found you by the burned cabin." "All the time," Emma admitted. "I think about how devastated I felt, how certain I was that my life was over. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even thought to pray. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met," Lucas said. "Crying over your lost home, but with this core of strength that I could see even through the grief." He paused. "I think I started falling in love with you that very first day, though I did not recognize it then." Emma turned to look at him. "I am so grateful you stopped to help. I am grateful for everything that has come from that moment. Our marriage, our children, the life we have built." "I told you I would build you another cabin," Lucas said with a smile. "I just did not tell you I was also building a future." "Best cabin I have ever had," Emma said, grinning. She kissed him, soft and sweet. "Best future, too." They sat together as the stars began to appear. 2 people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and created something beautiful. The cabin Lucas built still stood strong, shelter and symbol of everything they meant to each other. 10 years after that day in 1878, when Emma had knelt in ashes and believed all was lost, she stood on her porch watching her 3 children play in the yard. Thomas was 12 now, already helping Lucas with ranch work. Grace was 8, a skilled gardener who tended the vegetables and flowers with loving care. James was 6, currently involved in an elaborate game with his siblings that involved pretending to be cattle rustlers and sheriffs. Lucas rode up the trail from the southern pasture, sitting easy in the saddle on the same roan gelding that had carried them both that very first day. The horse was older now, as were they all, but still sound and reliable. Lucas dismounted and looped the reins over the porch rail, then climbed the steps to stand beside Emma. "Everything all right?" he asked, noting her reflective expression. "Everything is perfect," Emma said. She slipped her hand into his, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "I was just thinking about how much life can change, how quickly everything can fall apart, but also how quickly it can be rebuilt into something better than before." Lucas understood immediately what she meant. "Your cabin, more than the cabin. Everything. My whole life burned down that day, Lucas, and you built me something better." "We built it," Lucas corrected gently. "Together." Emma smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. "Together," she agreed. Thomas called out from the yard, "Mother, can we go fishing at the creek before supper?" "Stay where I can see you from the house," Emma called back. "And watch your brother. You know he will try to wade too deep." "I will watch him," Thomas promised, already herding his younger siblings toward the creek that ran through their property. Emma and Lucas stood together on the porch, watching their children disappear toward the water. The sun was warm, the sky was blue, and the mountains stood eternal in the distance. The cabin behind them was filled with laughter and love, its solid walls a testament to determination and hope. "No regrets?" Lucas asked quietly. Emma looked up at him, at this man who had appeared in her darkest hour and brought light into her life. His face was more weathered now, with lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun during long days working cattle. But his eyes still held that same steady strength that had reassured her from the very first day. "Not a single one," Emma said firmly. "You promised to build me a cabin and you gave me a home. You gave me a family and a future. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again." Lucas kissed her forehead. "You gave me all those things too. Before I met you, I was drifting. I had no real purpose, no place where I belonged. You became my home, Emma. You and these children and this land. Everything that matters to me is right here." As evening fell and the children returned from the creek, wet and happy and full of stories about the fish they had seen, Emma set about preparing supper. Lucas helped her, as he always did, working side by side in the kitchen of the cabin he had built. The children did their chores, feeding the chickens and bringing in firewood, then settled at the table Lucas had constructed with his own hands. Over a meal of venison stew and fresh bread, the family talked and laughed. Thomas described a new foal born that day at the Anderson Ranch. Grace showed off a particularly perfect tomato she had picked from her garden. James entertained them all with an elaborate story about tracking imaginary outlaws through the woods. After supper, while Emma and Grace washed dishes, Lucas helped the boys with reading practice. He had only limited education himself, but he was determined his children would have better. Emma had been teaching them from primers and whatever books they could acquire. Thomas was already reading at a level beyond his years. When the children were finally in bed, Emma and Lucas sat together by the fire, enjoying the quiet companionship. Lucas worked on repairing a bridle while Emma did mending. It was a peaceful domestic scene, the kind that had repeated itself thousands of times over their years together. "Frank wants to make Thomas a partner in the ranch eventually," Lucas said without looking up from his work. "Says he sees the same dedication and integrity in the boy that he saw in me." "Thomas would love that," Emma said, pleased. "He adores working with the horses and cattle." "He is a good boy, they all are." Lucas set aside the bridle. "We have been blessed, Emma. We have worked hard for what we have," Emma corrected. "And we have been smart and careful and supportive of each other. That is not luck, that is choice." Lucas smiled. "You are right, as usual." "I stand corrected." Emma set down her mending and moved to sit beside him. Lucas pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. "Tell me again," she said softly. "Tell you what? What you said that first day, when you found me crying in the ashes." Lucas knew immediately what she meant. He turned to cup her face in his hands, looking into her eyes with all the love he felt. "I said I would build you another cabin, and I did. But what I should have said was that I would build you a home, a life, a future. That I would stand beside you through everything that came, that I would love you for all my days." "That is exactly what you did," Emma whispered. She kissed him, deep and long, pouring everything she felt into that kiss. When they parted, both were breathless. They sat together as the fire burned low, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. Outside, the Montana night was cold and vast, but inside the cabin, there was warmth and love and the certainty of tomorrow. Years continued to pass, bringing the changes that time always brings. Thomas grew into a fine young man and did indeed become a partner in the Anderson ranch, eventually marrying a schoolteacher from Bozeman named Sarah. Grace proved to have a gift for healing and became a midwife, helping to bring new life into the world just as Mrs. Patterson had once helped bring her into it. James, the adventurous youngest child, went to work for the railroad for a few years before returning home and settling on a piece of property adjacent to his parents. Frank Anderson passed away peacefully at age 72, leaving his portion of the ranch to Lucas with the provision that it stay in the family. Lucas honored that trust, working the land with the same dedication he had shown from the beginning. Emma became a grandmother and then a great-grandmother. She taught her grandchildren to make preserves and tend gardens, just as her mother had taught her. She told them stories of the old days, of coming to Montana territory as a young bride, of losing her first cabin to fire, and of meeting a kind stranger who had changed her life forever. Lucas's hair went gray and then white. His hands, once so strong and sure, developed arthritis that made certain tasks difficult. But he still rose each morning with purpose, still worked the land he loved, still looked at Emma with the same devotion he had shown from the beginning. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the old cabin for a celebration. It had been expanded and modified over the years, but the core structure remained the same. Those original walls, notched and raised by Lucas's hands, still stood strong. During the celebration, Thomas stood to make a toast. He was a middle-aged man now, with children of his own, but his voice was thick with emotion. "I want to thank my parents for showing us what love looks like," he said. "For demonstrating that with dedication and hard work and mutual respect, a couple can build something that lasts. This cabin has stood for 40 years. But more importantly, their marriage has stood for 40 years, through good times and hardships, through joy and sorrow. That is the real legacy they have given us." To Emma and Lucas, the assembled family chorused, raising their glasses. Emma, now 68 years old, looked around at the faces of her family. Her children, strong and successful. Her grandchildren, healthy and happy. Her great-grandchildren, just beginning their own journeys. All of this had come from that terrible day when she thought everything was lost. She felt Lucas take her hand, his grip still firm despite the arthritis. She turned to him, seeing past the wrinkles and gray hair to the young man who had once promised to build her a cabin. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing he would understand all the things those two words encompassed. "Thank you," Lucas replied, his voice rough but steady, "for saying yes. For trusting me, for building this life with me." They kissed, gentle and sweet, while their family applauded and cheered. As the celebration continued around them, Emma thought about the path her life had taken. She thought about Thomas, her first husband, who had brought her to Montana and given her 5 good years before illness took him. She hoped he was at peace, wherever he was, and that he knew she had honored his final wish that she not let grief consume her. She thought about the fire that had destroyed her original cabin and how devastated she had felt in that moment. Now, with the perspective of 40 years, she could see that the fire had not been an ending but a beginning. It had cleared the way for something new, something better. Most of all, she thought about Lucas, about the unlikely blessing of a stranger appearing exactly when she needed him most, about the cabin he had built, which had become a home, about the love they had shared, which had only grown deeper and stronger with time. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, interrupting her reverie. Emma smiled. "I was thinking that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are preparing us for the best moments, that sometimes we have to lose everything to gain something better." "Profound thoughts for a party," Lucas teased gently. "I am an old woman. I am allowed to be profound." "You are beautiful," Lucas said firmly, "just as beautiful as the day I met you, covered in ash and crying over your lost home." "I was a mess that day," Emma protested. "You were magnificent," Lucas corrected. "Strong and vulnerable at the same time. I knew immediately that you were someone special." Emma leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth that had been her comfort for 40 years. "Build me another cabin," she murmured. "What?" "That is what you said. I was sobbing over my burned cabin, and you said you would build me another." Emma looked up at him. "It was the kindest, most generous thing anyone had ever offered me. It was the moment my life changed." Lucas wrapped his arms around her. "Best decision I ever made," he said. "Offering to help you that day, it gave me everything that matters." They stood together, surrounded by family, surrounded by love, in the cabin that had become so much more than shelter. It was the physical manifestation of their commitment, their love, their life together. Every log, every nail, every board held memories of the years they had shared. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson just as it had on so many evenings before, Emma Irving felt a deep and abiding contentment. She had lost her first home to fire and malice, but from those ashes had risen something far greater. A partnership built on mutual respect, a love that had weathered all storms, a family that would carry on long after she and Lucas were gone. The cabin Lucas built stood strong, just as he had promised it would. But more than that, the life they had built together stood strong. And that, Emma knew, was the greatest gift of all. Years later, when Emma and Lucas had both passed from this world into the next, their descendants gathered once more at the old cabin. It was now more than 60 years since Lucas had first raised those walls, and the structure showed its age. But it remained standing, solid and true, a testament to the skill of its builder and the love that had filled it. The family decided to preserve the cabin, to maintain it so future generations could visit and remember the story of Emma and Lucas. They placed a plaque by the door that read, "Built in 1878 by Lucas Irving for his wife Emma. May all who enter remember that love can rise from ashes and that the kindness of strangers can change the world." And so the cabin stood through the decades, sheltering new generations, hosting family gatherings, remaining as a monument to a promise kept, and a love that had transformed two lives into one remarkable story. The wildness of the West faded into history, but the cabin remained, along with the tale of the woman who lost everything and the cowboy who helped her find something better. In the end, Lucas had not just built Emma a cabin. He had built her a home, a family, and a legacy that would endure long after the last log finally fell. And that was worth more than all the gold in Montana territory.